Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And in that world, there are a handful of movies, comics, and TV shows that achieve a special kind of status. They're so unique, so groundbreaking, and so impactful that you can't just lump them into a single category. The story, the characters, and the overarching themes just hit so hard in so many unexpected ways. You don't entirely know what to make of it, you just know it's special. That's how I feel about Bojack Horseman, an animated series that ran for 6 seasons on Netflix. Now, to call this show just another animated cartoon would be an understatement and a disservice to those behind it. Yes, it's a cartoon. Yes, it involves a talking horseman, as well as many other talking animal-human hybrids. And yes, it has comedy, including a few jokes that will be right at home on a Simpsons rerun. But Bojack Horseman is so much more than that. This show tackles difficult, hard-hitting issues like depression, addiction, mental illness, and how we pursue happiness. Its characters aren't generic archetypes with flat, unchanging personalities. They're often complex characters complete with various flaws, motivations, and histories. Over the course of the show, as we see these characters grow and evolve, we encounter some pretty dark themes. But we also gain genuine insights that are incredibly relevant, regardless of how you feel about cartoons or talking horses. This show offers so many perspectives on so many topics. Too many for me to cover in one video. So, as both a lover of the show and someone who enjoys exploring these topics, I'll try to tackle just one of them. Depending on the response to this video, I'll consider tackling others. So for this particular video, I want to highlight one theme that is a constant catalyst throughout the show. It involves celebrities, celebrity culture, and how we view them. After all, Bojack Horseman, as a character, is highly influenced and deeply affected by his celebrity status. Even though he starts out as a washed-up sitcom star from the 90s, the world of celebrity is deeply entwined with that of Bojack's world. Now that's neither a good or bad thing, but this show makes a strong case that the good does not outweigh the bad. In the first few moments of the first episode of this show, we learn the basics of who Bojack Horseman is, beyond being a humanoid horseman. He is a celebrity, albeit one who hasn't been relative in a long time. In the 1990s, he was the star of a very successful TV show, Horsing Around. But since the show went off the air, his star has diminished. He has no major roles and no major prospects. People still recognize him as that horse from Horsing Around, but that's it. That's the extent of his celebrity. But that's still more than enough to instill in Bojack that distinct celebrity mindset. It manifests in different ways, but it's still painfully obvious, and the show is very overt about it. Being a celebrity means being treated better than everyone else. To some extent, it's like winning the lottery. It's a goal that many people seek, but only a very select few ever achieve. And for those that do, it has a tendency to go to their head. A lot. Bojack conveys that mentality bluntly and crudely throughout the first season. He frequently demonstrates a level of narcissism and self-importance that's not the least bit subtle. But, and this is where the show starts to reveal its depth, we also see the mechanisms behind this mentality. Because it's not a personality disorder or a quirk. Bojack may not be at the height of his fame anymore, but he still experiences it. He's still affected by the world of celebrity. He went through this rare but colorful experience of being famous, and fame has a distinct effect on people. You're not just treated like you're better than everyone else. The world around you constantly reinforces that. As a celebrity, Bojack can do things that most ordinary people can only dream of. He can drive around in fancy cars. He can hook up with beautiful women, including a few who aren't even the same species. He can even screw up, break rules, and commit outright crimes without consequence. And that later becomes a big deal for Bojack, but it still stems from his status as a celebrity. Now we see this in the real world too. there are countless stories of people who become famous and turn into narcissistic assholes. They think they're better than everyone because the world around them is telling them that. Now, some do manage to retain their humility, but plenty don't. Fame makes them callous, insensitive, and utterly oblivious to how non-celebrities live. Bojack himself even says it at one point. He doesn't understand how people live. It's amazing to him that people wake up and say, "Yay, another day, let's do it." But that's the corrosive effect that celebrity has on your mind. It essentially remaps how you see the world, along with how the world sees you. When Bojack goes out into this world, people don't just see Bojack. They see that horse from horsing around. He's less a person and more a byproduct of his fame. It basically ensures that he becomes detached from other people, and from himself for that matter. And despite having experienced the heights of celebrity, Bojack is still a very flawed, very broken person. And he's very aware of that, as he so often notes to others. But being a celebrity didn't fix those flaws. If anything, it made them much worse. And this is where that celebrity mentality can become very damaging. And as the show takes increasingly dark turns into increasingly darker themes, it highlights just how harmful celebrity status can be for certain people. It's a simple fact. Celebrities have problems. They often have very unique problems. And this is common knowledge. Anyone who's familiar with celebrity antics, as well as celebrity meltdowns, knows this all too well. The early lives of Robert Downey Jr. and Drew Barrymore are proof enough of that. And Bojack Horseman goes out of its way to highlight some of those problems. A great deal of this show's stories and its larger themes stem from how being a celebrity affects someone's personal problems. And on that front, Bojack certainly has plenty of problems to deal with. And some of those issues are exactly what we would expect of a celebrity, including those past their prime. Bojack is a heavy drinker and drug user with poor impulse control. He also has piss-poor judgment and rarely hesitates to exploit his celebrity status, especially when it gets him laid and out of trouble. At first, it's not clear whether being a celebrity caused these problems in Bojack, or if celebrity just compounded the problems that were already there. But in later seasons, it becomes clear that there's a little of both in play. We learn through various flashbacks that Bojack has a long history of self-destruction and self-loathing. He also did not come from a nurturing environment, or one that encouraged him to confront his problems. He is not a happy horseman. He doesn't like himself, and he's so cynical about everything that it's practically a reflex. And a lot of these were issues before he became a celebrity, but every one of them was made much worse by becoming a celebrity. It comes right back to that unique celebrity mentality. Bojack is locked in a world that tells him he's rich, famous, and successful. He literally has every resource at his disposal to be as happy as he wants to be. And yet he's still miserable. But how can that be? That same world caters to him in ways it doesn't cater to most people. But that's not exactly therapeutic. If anything, the very nature of celebrity has the exact opposite effect. In some situations, the fame can overshadow the parts of himself that he hates, but in most, it just enables him to be more self-destructive. Throughout the course of the show, he goes on multiple drug-fueled binges. The kind no ordinary person could do without a strong liver and celebrity backing. Where most people would stop, be stopped, or just run out of money or drugs, Bojack can keep going. The cops don't arrest him, his friends and peers don't stop him, and other celebrities even join him, such as Sarah Lynn. For Bojack Horseman, lapsing into his self-destructive tendencies is distressingly easy. His every demon and vice, be it alcohol, sex, or more fame, it's never too far from his reach. And the barriers between him and destructive behavior are just too few and too weak. Add on top of that his poor judgment and utter lack of willpower, and it's just not a healthy environment for him. In fact, the only time Bojack seems to function well is when he's in a structured environment, like rehab or prison. But there are other elements to that life that can be uniquely damaging, especially to someone with as many personal problems as Bojack. Most people can only daydream about having enough money to never have to work or toil for the rest of their lives. The idea of waking up whenever you want, not having to go to a job you hate, and living the life you want to live, it's really enticing. And it's a major motivation for those seeking fame and fortune. But for Bojack Horseman, it's not a daydream. That's his life when the show begins. He may be a washed-up celebrity, but he's still successful by most measures. Thanks to his show, Horsing Around, he has plenty of money. He doesn't have to work. He lives in this big, fancy house. He can essentially live out the rest of his life in comfort. And yet he's still miserable. Even though he spends most of his days on the couch drinking and watching reruns of his show, Bojack is not the least bit happy. And the more time he spends alone, the more aware he becomes of just how unhappy he is. It's why for much of the show, Bojack constantly seeks something that will make him happy. He thinks becoming famous again by publishing a book will change that. It didn't. He thinks getting his dream role in a Secretariat movie will change that. It didn't. He thinks being nominated for an Oscar will change that. It didn't. He also thinks developing a relationship with his estranged sister will change that. And that did help for a while, but it didn't last. And for complex reasons that are probably deserving of another video. But in every case, Bojack tries to pursue happiness and meaning in some misguided way. In certain cases, he genuinely works hard at it, whether it's acting in a new role or taking care of his dementia-laden mother. Bojack does put in the effort, but he never gets the results he wants. It's tragic, but not entirely surprising. And that's because Bojack falls into the same trap we see with many celebrities. Having lots of money and no obligations may seem nice, but it doesn't automatically make you happy. The inherent problems you have when you're poor are still there when you're rich. It's just easier to fill those deficiencies with something else when you're a celebrity. But at least when you're poor and have a job, you're still motivated to keep doing it, if only to stave off starvation. And when you're not a celebrity, you need people and communities to help you. They'll be in a position to stop you when you start to self-destruct. They'll also be there to hold you accountable before you cross too many lines. But when you're a celebrity, those support structures aren't always there. Sure, celebrities have legions of fans who claim to love them, but they won't have that small, tight-knit community of people who just like them for who they are, not because they were used to be in a famous sitcom in the 90s. And without that community, you feel alone, even with countless people singing your praises. And when you're that alone, you just become more aware of how miserable and broken you are. That's the place Bojack is when the show starts. And while he did manage to build somewhat of a community over the course of the show, he still ultimately lost it. And because he's a celebrity, it was all too easy. Make no mistake, Bojack Horseman is a very dark show. There are a number of moments that get distressingly heavy, more so than most shows, animated or otherwise. And to get to those dark places, it often requires that people dehumanize those around them. A celebrity, including the ones we consider washed up, will attract plenty of people. But few of those people will ever be their true friends. Few would even want to be their friend. Many will just end up being grifters, whores, or opportunists. They see a celebrity like Bojack as a means to an end. And Bojack certainly encounters plenty of those people throughout the course of the show, from callous network executives to eccentric directors. The whole experience effectively dehumanizes him and other celebrities like him. A lot of it comes from us, the public. People see a celebrity and they don't see the person. They just see the fame, prestige, and fortune. And this definitely has an effect on Bojack, especially in season 5. While playing his part in the show Filbert, he completely loses touch with reality. The line between being Bojack Horseman and being the character he's playing completely disappears, which leads to some serious consequences, as suffered by his girlfriend Gina. But it's not just the celebrities that get dehumanized. Once you attain a certain status, the people around you become a lot more disposable. Being rich and successful, you can literally afford to just cast people aside. Now, that's not easy to do for most people. You kind of need to maintain your social connections. Piss off one too many of them, and they won't be there to help you when you really need it. And Bojack, true to his self-destructive nature, has a bad habit of casting aside those who saw him as more than just that horse from horsing around. But it's what he did to his friend and former partner, Herb Kazaz, that was especially tragic. In many respects, what happened to him and Herb set the tone for how Bojack's life would pan out. As the creator of Horsing Around, Herb was the reason Bojack became a celebrity in the first place. And on top of that, Herb was his best friend. Herb knew Bojack better than anyone. Herb could relate to Bojack as an actual person, which is something we all need, especially when we have huge personal problems. But then, when Herb was outed as gay, which counted as a big scandal in the 1990s, Bojack had a choice to make. He could either abandon Herb to keep his celebrity status, or stand by him and potentially lose it all. It was a huge decision, one of the most consequential decisions in the entire show. And Bojack chose to abandon Herb. That choice, to just ditch your best friend, is a choice that's very hard to make if you're not a celebrity. Most of us can't choose to just rid our lives of someone. There are friends and family that we just can't avoid, even if we have a falling out. But being a celebrity means you don't need that support structure quite as much to function. You have the money and influence to cut ties with whoever you want. You can cast someone aside, buy a house in the Hollywood Hills, and avoid them for 20 years. That's what Bojack did. And as a result, he never had another friend who could relate to him as a person. It set a bad precedent for how Bojack deals with friends and family in the future. Even though a few people, namely Diane, managed to connect with him on a personal level, he still never finds someone who sees him more as a person than a celebrity. The fact that he could so easily cut these people out of his life only made it easier for him to self-destruct. And that's what happens to Bojack on multiple occasions. But the fact it happens more than once reveals what might be the most frustrating effect of celebrity. While Bojack Horseman does play it up for comedy a few times, it also doesn't avoid the much darker implications. Ever notice how the media makes such a big deal about celebrities who get arrested or go to jail? Well, the simple fact that it's news is revealing, because it implies that this sort of thing is exceedingly rare. A celebrity getting held accountable for their actions, even if those actions are outright crimes, it just doesn't happen very often. That's one of the many benefits of having money, influence, and access to high-profile lawyers. When a celebrity is held accountable, it's usually because their behavior was both uniquely egregious and just couldn't be covered up. And Bojack Horseman explores this dynamic a great deal, both for comedic and thematic effect. Throughout the show, Bojack gets away with some pretty serious misdeeds. Some are petty. He drives drunk all the time, he parks in handicapped spaces, and he gives alcohol to high school kids. These are all things that would get most people fined or thrown in jail. But a celebrity rarely faces such consequences. And Bojack isn't the only one. Throughout the show, we see other celebrities getting away with all sorts of crazy antics. Bojack's ghostwriter turned friend, Diane Nguyen, is frequently frustrated by it. On more than one occasion, she goes off on angry rants about how nobody holds celebrities accountable. They can get away with sexually assaulting women for years. They can get away with lying to the police about the death of a friend. They can even get away with stealing the D from the Hollywood sign. Yeah, that really happened. And people just went along with it. Hell, for most of the show, they actually called it Hollywoo. It's a running joke, but it also perfectly encapsulates the utter lack of limits we have on celebrities. But it's not necessarily something they created by design. It's more a byproduct of an industry that's always seeking more money and will compromise pretty much anything to get it. In a sense, Bojack Horseman paints Hollywoo as every bit as unscrupulous as tobacco companies. And celebrities themselves can be the cancer that system incurs. These people can do whatever they want and get away with it. And yet, people still love them. They may not necessarily like them, a fact Bojack famously points out, but they'll still be admired. Even when their crimes are publicly exposed, people tend to forget about them and just move on. It's something that both Bojack and Diane seem resigned to by the end of the show. Even when they suffer personally, the world of celebrity around them still endures. It's bigger than any of them, and it'll always affect them, for better and for worse. Now, there's a lot to be said about celebrities and how they're rarely held accountable. Bojack Horseman says plenty throughout its 6 memorable seasons, but it also speaks to the deeper psychological impacts of being a celebrity. To some extent, it puts them into this real-life fantasy world. To appreciate it, you need only look at the show that made Bojack a celebrity in the first place, Horsing Around. That show is portrayed as a perfect product of its time. Horsing Around was this wholesome yet generic story about a simple horseman raising 3 lovable orphans. It's full of simple puns and basic plots that are easily resolved within a half hour. This idealistic world, a world where all problems and challenges are overcome by the end, it's the utter antithesis of Bojack's world. It's also the complete antithesis of the real world in general. Major issues, be they personal, political, or systemic, they just can't be resolved with a simple, heartfelt speech. You can't just magically turn someone from a depressed, self-destructive substance abuser into the picture of mental health within the span of a single episode. You can't even do that in the span of several seasons. People are just too complicated. But TV shows like Horsing Around give the impression that all our problems can be solved. Same goes for movies. You could even argue that advertising does this too, promising that their product will fix your shortcomings. But it's just not true. People like Bojack Horseman want to believe that things can fix themselves like they do in a TV show. It just never works out. Again, Bojack makes the effort in the early seasons, trying to basically mirror the wholesome, healthy relationship he had with Sarah Lynn. But it doesn't end well. In fact, it ends tragically. Anyone who's watched the show knows why. But this is the escapist fantasy that Hollywood is trying to sell us. And while most people understand that it's a fantasy, there are those who want too badly for it to be real. And Bojack Horseman, being both a celebrity and someone with so many personal problems, he wants it more than most. At times, it seems to fuel his self-destructive nature. He keeps trying to pursue these efforts that seem ripped from a sitcom, be it reconnecting with Sarah Lynn or trying to win an Oscar, but it never lasts. It never gets to a point where the credits roll and everyone lives happily ever after. They still have to wake up the next day, often with the same problems, and have to keep moving forward. It's a huge struggle. And for Bojack, it's both frustrating and damaging. Being a celebrity, he's in a better position than most to pursue that fantasy world depicted on TV. He wants so badly for it to be real, and he's willing to go to great lengths to pursue it. And some celebrities in the real world make a similar effort. Just look at the efforts Michael Jackson went to. But even for celebrities who aren't at that level, it's easy to lose yourself in Hollywood's fantasy world. Bojack is deep within that world, surrounded by all the glitz and glamour that comes with it. But it doesn't make him happy. It doesn't fix his problems. No matter what he does, good or bad, he still has to wake up the next morning and deal with himself. It's the one thing that no celebrity can escape, no matter how successful they are. And the harder they try to escape it, the more damage they ultimately do. That's a lesson many celebrities learn the hard way. And it's a lesson that defines Bojack Horseman, both the character and the show. Bojack Horseman is such a unique show. There's just so much to take in terms of plot, characters, and depth. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Characters you think are just flat, flanderized archetypes turn out to be complicated, multi-layered people. Like real life, these individuals have a complexity to them that only grows the more you learn about them. And again, this is a show full of animated human-animal hybrids. The fact it could make characters this complex is a testament to its creators, writers, and voice actors. But through the show's satire and nuance, we gain all sorts of insights into complex issues. The world of celebrities and the toxic effects they incur is just part of that narrative. And it's a big part too, one that really shaped the show's emotional core. Bojack Horseman's story simply could not have been told without the backdrop of celebrity. And many of the show's most powerful moments couldn't have happened without incorporating the worst aspects of celebrity culture. Putting these characters into this system, this industry that turns ordinary people into larger-than-life pop culture figures, it reveals a lot about what this does to a person. And for people with serious issues like Bojack, Princess Caroline, or Sarah Lynn, it can be incredibly harmful. The show stops short of saying being a celebrity is inherently bad. At the end of the day, these celebrities are still people, and people are only as bad as how they conduct themselves. It never plays out like a movie or TV show, it just plays out. And celebrities like Bojack have to deal with that. It's a huge challenge. But as a wise monkey man said at the end of the first season, it gets easier. Doing it every day is the hardest part. And among the many dark themes in Bojack Horseman, that might be the most encouraging thing for celebrities and non-celebrities alike. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Take care, stay safe, and try not to horse around too much.